It has never been like this. And the convention and practice always is that the leader of the opposition is afforded the same time as the Minister of Finance during his presentation. And in the vast majority of parliaments that I know, the practice is that there is always a few intervening hours to allow the opposition to prepare for their responses. You know, Mr. Speaker, you can, if it is your wish, be to our Parliament what John Bercow is to the House of Commons. But of course, to achieve that extraordinary status, then the incidents sometimes that occur have to be minimized. The second comment, Mr. Speaker, that I want to make is that this is a debate of continuity. It is one debate. From the debate on the estimates of revenue and expenditure to the policy debate. Indeed, in this budget address, the Minister of Finance repeated much of what had been said at the estimates debate. So what was said in the last debate on the estimates of revenue and expenditure remain alive and relevant. So, Mr. Speaker, this is also an opportunity to respond to some of his outrageous statements in his closing reply to the issues raised in the course of the estimates debate. And I would expect that the same latitude that was granted will also be granted to me and others on the opposition benches. Mr. Speaker, I come now to the meat of my presentation. I note the rather scant presentation of the Minister of Finance on domestic economic developments. In particular, the Minister of Finance highlights the receipts from the CIP of approximately $66 million, resulting in a lower overall deficit of $69.7 million. What this conceals is the expenditure pattern of the government. As the member for Library pointed out earlier in his contribution, had it not been for these CIP resources, the fiscal accounts of the government would have been in a dismal state. To date, we have no explanation of how the government has used this income. The Minister of Finance must answer two simple questions. Has he used CIP resources to finance recurring expenditure? And if so, how much? Secondly, which specific projects have been financed by CIP revenue? The Minister of Finance will do well to take a page from our neighbors who are disclosing the specific projects for which the CIP has been used to finance. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, this Minister of Finance tries to convince the people of St. Lucia that all is well with tax liability because of dedicated revenue streams to pay for expenditure, including any expenditure financed by debt. Listen to him again in this budget address. Quote, whereas much of the planned intervention will require an increase in the debt stock, I am mindful of this, in brackets, and new revenue streams have been established to service these debt arrangements. In fact, my notes have a slight adjustment, and it might be worth returning to the original source to ensure that it is absolutely accurate. Whereas much of the planned intervention will require an increase in the debt stock, my government is mindful of this, and new revenue streams have been established to service these debt arrangements. And again in repetition, this time, Mr. Speaker, at page 31, it is in this spirit, Mr. Speaker, that dedicated revenue streams have been allocated to fund both road and port infrastructure of government, unquote. When one listens to these pronouncements, Mr. Speaker, one would think that certain amounts from existing revenue is being set aside for the payment of these items of expenditure. The simple fact of the matter is that you are taxing people to pay for expenditure, including mountains of debt. And so it is with the $4 tax on gas. A tax, and you then say you have a revenue stream, totally divorced from the reality that is a tax. You're making people pay by taxing them. Of course, we know 150 of which is supposed to be for roads. So it is true that St. Lucians and visitors now have to pay a tidy sum to use our airports to pay the debt incurred by the redevelopment of the Hiwanoro Airport. An airport development tax, US $35, was imposed. So too, the airport departure tax was raised from US $25 to US $38. And of course, this gives me a point of departure to respond in respect of the Hiwanoro redevelopment project. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is repeatedly told that we are bad managers, and you heard it so many times in the last 2 days. One thing I agree with is that we are bad managers of corruption and unethical practices. I agree with that. The budget suggests that the designs and geotechnical studies for the Hiwanoro International Airport are at an advanced stage. How then has a government been able to assign a cost to the project if the designs and the geotechnical studies have not been finalized? It's a most remarkable way to approach massive expenditure. We are told that the airport will cost US $175 million, approximately EC $472 million. Jump high or jump low, this will have a massive impact on our debt to GDP profile. Since the income from the departure tax and the so-called development tax will be foregone by SLASPA, allegedly to the so-called lockbox, or a significant percentage of it, it will be interesting to see how SLASPA will generate future income to meet the cost of its operations and to finance other future investment. It is an opportunity cost, an opportunity lost. We shall surely see in good time. But, Mr. Speaker, there is a matter that will no longer go unheeded. The Minister of Finance has repeatedly criticized me for stopping the airport tax imposed by the former UWP administration when I held office. He claims that by now that tax would have yielded in the region of some EC 200 million for the airport redevelopment. One thing I want him to know is this: we do not share the same values when it comes to respecting the law. In no circumstances do we share the same values. Examples of our differences abound. Just look at the situation today. Up to now, this House does not have a deputy speaker. Define the very conventions and practices at the heart of our parliamentary process. Speaker, it was the view of the administration which I led and myself that it was unlawful, indeed irrational and unreasonable, to tax the people of St. Lucia for a development that was ill-defined, had not been costed, had not commenced, and was mired in allegations of corruption. Mr. Speaker, I listened, and I'm sure you did as well, to the policy agenda of the government. I ask whatever happened to the insolvency and secure transactions reforms which commenced under the Labour administration. These reforms would have assisted in resolving issues regarding restructuring of businesses which were experiencing financial difficulties and allowing small businesses to leverage movable assets such as their stock, machinery, etc., to secure access to credit to expand their operations. Surely, any caring government would ensure that these reforms are carefully structured and implemented. I guess this is another example of the stop culture, or put on hold culture we heard, I think, today of this administration. Mr. Speaker, I cannot resist the temptation to touch on the Tourism Competitiveness Project. It was lauded by the Minister of Finance, and the member for Ancillary Canaries regaled us last night with the several projects that will be financed, including, of course, the pedestrianization of the boulevard. Of course, nowhere in the statement citing the project is there any mention that this project is a product of the vision of the St. Lucia Labour Party. Nowhere. I guess the fact that it was an ongoing project financed by the World Bank made it difficult to stop this project. Initially, Mr. Speaker, the World Bank proposed a project which focused only on a pilot project for a regional ferry. It was as a result of persistent and significant negotiations on the part of the Labour administration that the initiatives which target downtown Castries were included in the project. But you know the irony of all of this, Mr. Speaker? Sometimes we do not give credit to those public officers whose expertise and imagination develop these projects, as the NIC promotion says, for the benefit of us all. The permanent secretary who largely persuaded the World Bank is no longer with the government of St. Lucia. Life was made so intolerable for her that she had to resign and go elsewhere to work to protect her professional and intellectual integrity. Mr. Speaker, I come now to the centerpiece of the proposals of the Minister of Finance in this budget statement. His pronouncements on reforms to the personal income tax regime. I had thought that's consistent with the announcement of so-called game changers. We'd have been treated to a new, innovative, and imaginative regime of personal taxation. To my astonishment, the announced regime sounded eerily familiar. Apparently, this Minister of Finance does not know there's something called plagiarism. When you do not acknowledge ideas from others in their essential details, it is treated as intellectual theft. The proposals of the Minister of Finance are, in fact, a restatement of the proposals which I announced in Parliament on May 12, 2015. Mr. Speaker, I take it you have not only heard but read the proposal of the Minister of Finance at pages 33 to 38 of his presentation. Now, Mr. Speaker, here are the proposals to the proposed regime, to the income tax regime, which I announced in 2015 at page 74 of the budget statement. This will help you to understand my earlier comment, quote, and I'm reading from that statement at page 72. Of course, it's already part of Hansard. Mr. Speaker, the current personal income tax regime has a threshold of $18,000, 4 tax bands and rates, and 28 allowances and deductions. This is by far the highest number of allowances and deductions across the OECS. Almost word for word. Almost. Not entirely. This gives rise to the following challenges. One, the sourcing of multiple supporting documents is a nightmare for individual taxpayers who are required to file annual returns. Consequently, the processing of these returns is delayed. The uploading of the required supporting documents acts as a disincentive to taxpayers wishing to utilize the electronic method of filing, e-filing. The number of tax bands and rates complicates the computation of the tax payable for the taxpayer. The volume of deductions and ensuring paper submissions for verifications consume time and focus of the Inland Revenue Department. The current income tax structure militates against the progressivity of the system. Under the current personal income tax system, it has been noted that the relative tax contribution of the very high income earners is not comparable to that of the low and medium income earners. The burden of the tax system is really on the backs of middle class and low income earners because they cannot always access the range of deductions which higher income earners enjoy. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's the background. And this is the proposal. One, increase the personal allowance from $18,000 to $25,000. By increasing the personal allowance by $7,000, some 2,705 taxpayers will no longer be required to file a return and will pay no income tax. Two, amend the tax bands and establish only two bands with the following rates. Chargeable income of up to $30,000, 15%. Chargeable income of $30,001 and above, 25%. Limit the number of existing deductions to 4 priority areas as follows. Medical deduction allowed for medical insurance premiums and expenses. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Future benefits defined as life insurance, National Insurance Corporation contributions, pension contributions, and registered retirement savings. Very familiar. Education benefit, which includes both the child allowance and the deduction for student loan interest for university education and equivalent, and D, mortgage interest and property tax payments. Limit the aggregate of all the deductions that can be claimed to a maximum of $25,000. Taxpayers are free to claim a value of deductions up to the overall cap of $25,000 in any or all of the 4 priority areas identified. This flexibility will allow taxpayers in any given year to make claims based on their unique circumstances. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you'll agree with me that this is remarkably similar. Of course, there are 2 differences that are important and will have to feature at the appropriate time in the debate when any amendment bill reaches its House. So there are 2 major differences between the proposals of the Minister of Finance and that of the former administration that we can touch on. First, the Minister of Finance says that the personal allowance will be increased from $18,000 to $23,000. The former administration had planned to increase the same personal allowance from $18,000 to $25,000. Put differently, the former Labour government proposed a higher personal allowance, $2,000 more than that announced by the Minister of Finance. Secondly, this Minister of Finance proposes 3 tax bands with 3 rates of tax, 10%, 20%, and 30%. The former Minister of Finance had announced 2 tax bands of 15% and 25%, respectively. Again, at the higher end, the proposals are separated by 5% in the tax band. So whereas the proposal is to tax persons of qualifying incomes at a rate of 30%, the former government had restricted that rate using 2 tax bands to 25%. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, the proposals of this Minister of Finance will severely burden and punish middle-class earners and professionals, especially those employed in companies and captive services like the public service. You're really going after persons, I believe, from grade 13 upwards in the public service. This is a category that is already overburdened by taxation. The proposed tax rate for these individuals, depending of course on their deductibles, is 30%. Had the proposals of the former government been adopted, the tax rate would have been 25%, lower by 5%. Mr. Speaker, be that as it may, plagiarism notwithstanding, I note that the Minister of Finance failed to provide what the revenue yield will be as a result of these changes. The question will be what further changes will be coming to compensate for the loss of revenue. But I say this, Mr. Speaker, and as you know, this is rare in this chamber. Given the potential to find common ground, the Minister of Finance is urged, while he has time, to rethink his proposals and adopt the proposals of the former government. Mr. Speaker, a hallmark of this Minister of Finance is his tendency to be economical with the truth. Not even when it comes to matters of justice, he can honor truth. Take this statement at page 23 of his budget address. Quote, "This administration has spent more on the renovation of court infrastructure and facilities than any other administration." Now, you know, he could have said what he said and just left out that statement. This is false, Mr. Speaker. True, some repairs have been done to the Naira court, and some relocation of courts have to take place. But what is the greatest expenditure the government has incurred to justify this statement? It is the former administration that created the commercial division of the High Court, paid for the refurbishment of La Place Carénage, commenced the upgrading of the former police station in Vieux-Fort to accommodate a new court, spent millions to refurbish the now disused court building, relocated the judiciary to the very narrow court. I want to compete on a matter like that. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not often I choose to speak on matters of infrastructure. Not often. But there's one aspect that causes me considerable unease. Mr. Speaker, the infrastructure strategy of this government reveals, for me, considerable policy dissonance and discomfort. The Millennium Highway Rehabilitation Project had already been appraised with loan approval by the OPEC Fund for International Development, OFID, by the time the United Workers' Party administration assumed office. OFID offered a loan at an interest rate, I believe, of 4%. The project was cancelled. Only now for this government to begin preparation with another donor, the UK Caribbean Infrastructure Fund, to finance that very project. And of course, everybody who's familiar with the history of that project will know that this project commenced with dialogue between the government of St. Lucia and the then Prime Minister Cameron. But that is water under the bridge. No matter how they rewrite history and what they say, that is factual. But what alarms me is a wanton waste of resources, certainly the time of public officers spent on preparing a project twice. Moreover, the UK Caribbean infrastructure grant was supposed to be used for a project of major transformational value to St. Lucia. The Labour administration had been investigating the feasibility of the North-South Link Road for a while, given how costly such a venture was likely to be. The grant from the UK would have been a major signal that the project was feasible, capable of attracting additional financing. Accordingly, this North-South Link Road would have opened a major section of the country to development. The Labour administration had prepared for this. We had prepared a plan of development for that area, featuring areas of conservation, protection, low-impact development, and of course, higher-impact development. All these plans, Mr. Speaker, have been shelved. Instead, the government chose to give up a major opportunity for attaining this road, choosing to resurface an existing road for which financing had already been secured. How confusing. Talk about policy dissonance. Mr. Speaker, I predict that the amount which has been allocated from the UK government for repaving the Soufrière Castries Highway and to repair and rehabilitate the Millennium Highway will be insufficient, and additional resources beyond the grant offered by the British will have to be procured. Finally, I hope, Mr. Speaker, that the St. Lucia Labour Party never ever gives up on the dream of constructing a north-south link to open up the east coast of St. Lucia to new development. One notes, Mr. Speaker, the so-called outcomes announced and identified by the Minister of Finance for the medium term. It is rare, exceedingly rare, that I agree with this Minister of Finance. I agree that the health sector ought to be a priority. No one, I think, disputes this. However, I find it quite odd that the government will stop work on both major hospitals can now say it is interested in the health of the nation. This issue of St. Jude will always remain a talking point. There is every reason for it to be a particularly vexing issue. To this day, this government cannot justify why it is constructing a new wing to the hospital. This is what their consultant in the yet-to-be-released report told them in clear and unmistakable terms at page 162. Quote, "The issues highlighted as significant in nature. However, we do see a great value present in the works completed to date and believe the project is salvageable and could be converted into a facility that can properly serve the needs of St. Lucia, as St. Jude Hospital is designated a primary health care facility with one of its primary roles to ensure effective acute and referral services in the south of the island with future potential for growth and development." Unquote. That was the report of their consultant. A report that is yet being made available to the Parliament of St. Lucia and to the public of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the only reason why this new wing has to be added is to meet the insatiable appetite of the Agulus amidst those on the opposite side. Agulus. This really has been a monumental tragedy for the people of St. Lucia and in particular for the people of the South. Those of us who have had relatives who have died at St. Jude Hospital because of the quality of care over problems, we know it and we can feel it. In the process, Mr. Speaker, well-intentioned professionals were recklessly defamed, their reputations destroyed, possibly beyond repair, and it is not over. And why has a consultant's report not yet been released? Why? If this is your strongest argument, your principal justification, why not release it? So many persons who are accused of engaging in corrupt behavior, why not release it? Is it that the administration fears the lawsuits for defamation that will surely come their way? Is that part of the reason? And talking of health insurance, Mr. Speaker, what is this about a pilot project for national health insurance? That is quite strange. On the meeting office, there had already been work undertaken to examine options for universal health financing in St. Lucia, led by a team from UWI Health Economics Unit, PAHO and other donors. All of this work should be sitting on the shelves of the Ministry of Health. Yet this government tells us that they will examine all options. What are the options that have already been examined? Mr. Speaker, months ago I warned the government that it should not politicize health care, that it should approach the issue of healthcare financing on a bipartisan basis. I even alluded to the fact that an attempt was made to set up a joint committee of parliament with the private sector to look at this issue and to arrive at recommendations to government. That initiative never got off the ground. I guess the glory of victory was too overwhelming. Now it is too late. The lines are drawn. The country is sharply divided, and there is no prospect ever of working in tandem or in cooperation on these matters. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance cites performance of the banking sector as an index of the health of the economy and its positive performance. He does this, I believe, at page 8 of his statement in the following terms. And let's take a look at this page 8. Quote, in the financial sector, commercial bank profitability improved in 2018. I note with interest the positive performance of ECFH, which has posted 2 consecutive years of profits. Bank lending continued to contract while deposits expanded further, leading to increased liquidity in the banking system. Non-performing loans continued to trend downward to 10% at the end of 2018. In the non-bank financial sector, credit union loan stock expanded further while the insurance sector experienced increased activity. Unquote, and this, as I indicated to you, Mr. Speaker, is cited at page 8 of his presentation. So, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance alludes to improvements in the domestic banking sector, but states that credit from the commercial banking system contracted. Mr. Speaker, why should we believe that the economy is doing as well as the Minister of Finance claims when the commercial banks are having such a tough time finding businesses and households to lend money to? Why? The curious thing, Mr. Speaker, is that the economy is doing well, yet bank lending continues to contract even in the face of an expansion in deposits. Surely, a buoyant economy should see an expansion in loans. This is not happening. Why? The fact of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is this. And that's always a problem when we never want to provide reasons or give context to what we quote. All of these major banks have had to undergo restructuring between the years 2011 to 2016. ECFH's history we know exceedingly well. And there's no need for repetition. These banks are leaner today because Some have written off millions of bad loans. Others have sold off millions of dollars in bad debts to clean up their books. And it may well be said, Mr. Speaker, that some of them did that deliberately because they have plans regarding their future holdings. All, Mr. Speaker, have increased bank charges to customers, in some cases to levels which are unreasonable, unconscionable, and abusive. The bank's profitability must improve. They must improve because they all have voracious appetites. What I am particularly concerned about, Mr. Speaker, is the treatment that is being meted out to citizens of this country, especially by the foreign-owned banks. No one seems to care about the charges that have been imposed on customers, sometimes with no explanation. There is no comfort from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. That bank has never accepted that it is part of its responsibility to protect customers from charges imposed by banks. The time has come, Mr. Speaker, for the introduction of legislation to confirm the rights of consumers of banking services. Perhaps the local banks under their umbrella organization should take the lead on what is now a vexing problem and follow their counterparts in the Barbados Bankers Association and commit to a new code of banking practice and behavior. This code should commit banks to reveal all charges and fees relating to their services upfront. Fees should not be introduced or increased simply at the whim of banks without prior notification to customers. The code should detail the rights of customers, the procedure for operating accounts, the foreign exchange services which are available, the entitlements of customers to confidentiality, and complaint handling procedures. But, Mr. Speaker, there is one other matter that concerns me. That is St. Lucia's foreign exchange holdings at the central bank. The Social and Economic Review notes that tempering the growth in net foreign assets were lower by 87.9 million imputed reserves at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to 833.3 million at the end of 2018. And I'm quoting from page 62. No explanation is offered for this decline. Generally, Mr. Speaker, foreign branch banks keep their liquidity outside and bring in funds when they need to finance projects. Put differently, they deploy liquidity where and when needed instead of keeping it in the region. But this is strange because the amount involved is not insignificant at this time. Mr. Speaker, and I'm concluding, Mr. Speaker, I note that the Minister of Finance has now taken the occasion of this budget to indicate the government's stance on the sale of the Bank of Nova Scotia. One would have thought that customers of the bank in St. Lucia would have been entitled to know the government's thinking on a sale with major implications for them. Of course, Mr. Speaker, this may be the first of others, but we shall wait and we shall see. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I will be, as I have indicated, I am concluding. This budget, Mr. Speaker, is no masterpiece. It was and remains an agulu guafal budget. But, Mr. Speaker, there is a variation of that well-known Creole term. It is this: agulu ek tout piti, ka manger toute la jeune. On that note, Mr. Speaker, I end and I thank you.
Is it space for you to evaluate?
Minister for Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation, and member for Castries Southeast.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Though it's getting late into the night, Mr. Speaker, but I stand here to give my support to this Appropriation Bill 2019-2020. Mr. Speaker, it's been a couple of days where we've had a fair amount of discussions. We've heard presentations from both sides of this honorable House. But Mr. Speaker, the wise man says in the book of Proverbs, chapter 10, or chapter 17 and verse 10, a reproof enters more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. When you are corrected, you take corrections. But a fool, no matter how many stripes he gets beaten with, he just does not get it. Mr. Speaker, when I listen to the discussions and the arguments put forward by the opposition, I have to wonder whether these are real people, whether they were in government at any point in time in the history of this country. And I will explain what I mean, Mr. Speaker, as I go along. But I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the constituents of Castries Southeast. I am immensely proud of these people whom I represent in Castries Southeast. And Mr. Speaker, as I go along in my presentation, you would have an appreciation of what I am saying, because, Mr. Speaker, politics is never a fair business. The reality of what is happening in this honorable House, some persons cannot come to terms with. But, Mr. Speaker, the record speaks for itself. And no matter how much explanation is given, the reality is we cannot change the history. What is recorded and what was achieved is what remains. Wishful thinking cannot change that. And so, Mr. Speaker, I will use a quote here, because I want you to understand what I am saying, Mr. Speaker, and to have an appreciation for my approach towards this budget. Mr. Speaker, it's not always very easy but it says, men are alike in their promises. It is only in their deeds that they differ. Men are alike in their promises. It is only in their deeds they differ. So we've heard the promises. And Mr. Speaker, I was taken aback listening to the member for Viewfort South, as if he has some intellectual property right to policy developments in this country, and almost accusing the Prime Minister of plagiarism, as if the ideas of development and the plans for this country resided with him. Well, if it was his, he should have preserved it as his intellectual property right and not allow anybody else to use it without his permission.
Copyrighted.
He should have copyrighted it. But you see, Mr. Speaker, the opposition is only good on talk.
Talk shop.
They can talk.
Talk shop.
You know, if I were to ask the members opposite Mr. Speaker, some of them, Mr. Speaker, through you, maybe even too young to remember or to have been involved in any level of politics that involved the Governor General and his relationship with the Labour Party.
The truth.
But I will remind them, Mr. Speaker,
I agree with you.
and what do we continue to see in this honorable house? That whenever the Governor General comes to this honorable house, these members walk out. But when it comes to going to government house to wine and dine and eat, some of them are there, Mr. Speaker, at the same Governor General's house. They go there and they wine and dine. And when they go to cocktails because there's eat and drink, they meet with the Governor General. But when it comes to deal with the business of the country, this side of the house is empty. I've said it before. I want them to read the article that I made a document of this house. He who is double-crossed, crosses. He who is double-crossed, crosses. Every man understands why he makes his decisions when he makes it. And these are the leaders in this country on the opposition who tell us, y'all are a heartless set of people. Y'all don't care about the people of St. Lucia. Something that happened 30 years ago, you cannot forgive a man for it. Even if you didn't even understand what transpired, you still hold it and you march out of parliament where you are elected to do the business of the people and to be here. But you go. You see, Mr. Speaker, that is what this Labour Party is all about. And anytime things don't go their way, they begin to attack you personally. So let's look at the budget that is before us today, Mr. Speaker, because it is important for us. I want young St. Lucians, those who do not know the history of the politics, I want them to read, that is the documents with the history. I want them to read Rainbow's Edge, find out who wrote it, and find out what is in there. I want them to read It Will Be All Right in the Morning, and Lapses and Infelicities, and Foolish Virgins. When you read these things, you would understand the politics of St. Lucia, and it will be very revealing, some of the things that have transpired in the politics of this country that is still hidden to a lot of people. I don't need Rick to defend me. Rick can defend himself and I can defend myself. So let's go to the budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I go there, I want to acknowledge the departments within my ministry. I want to acknowledge the people in the Ministry of Economic Development, in Housing and Urban Renewal, the CDP department, also the National Housing Corporation, the members of the NTRC and ECTEL, and all of the agencies who work alongside to help the ministry fulfill its mandate. I applaud all of the persons that I work for. or I work with. And I want them to know that collectively we are going to accomplish what we have set to accomplish for the people of St. Lucia. Because this is not about a minister, this is about the work of the country. And so I acknowledge every one of them. I heard the member for Beaufort South, but I will come to this as we go along. When he tells you that people are pressured in ministries to make them resign, ask him. His niece is still the DPS in my ministry after 3 years. And you know what? We have a very good working relationship. And I have zero problems with her in the ministry. So when you want to talk, why am I bringing her into this? Why did you bring the other person into it? Why did you bring the other person who was
Honorable
the PS in the ministry
Honorable
who you claim had to resign? You see, Mr. Speaker, no, there are rules. And we are going to come to the rules as we go along. Because some people believe that they can talk about your family as they want, and once it's their family, it's sacred ground. But we are coming to this. We are going to deal with everything that has been dealt with here today, right here and right now. Because, Mr. Speaker, you see, it is easy for people to label ministers and to say you have problems and you have this and you have that. So, Mr. Speaker, I have to highlight the people that I have worked with and find out how many of them was ever fired or transferred from my ministry. And I will come to that because that is the work of the government. So, as we go along, Mr. Speaker, we are coming into 3 years in government. And we have heard the opposition. They want to explain everything, why they could not do things. So, let's go to Social and Economic Review 2014. Domestic developments. And I want you to pay attention to the words that are there. On page 15, preliminary indicators of St. Lucia's economy suggest tepid economic activity following declines in outputs in 2013 and 2014, due in part to the lingering impact of the global economic downturn coupled with domestic structural growth inhibiting factors. Real GDP is estimated to have declined. So note the words, Mr. Speaker. We are describing a situation, and I like to compare apples with apples. So you won elections in 2011. In 2014 would have been your third year in office. We won elections in 2016. 2019 will be our third year. And let me give you a lesson in how you manage an economy. Let us see what the developments are and how it is described. So we go along. Influenced by weak performance. Not the words of the main sectors of the economy except tourism. The lower rate of construction in economic activity in 2014 was attributed by continued growth in tourism supported by expansions in a few other sectors. Consistent with constrained economic activity, the rate of unemployment increased to 24.4% in 2014, up from 23.3% recorded in 2013. So under the labor administration, what should be going up was going down. And what should be going down was going up. They were doing things in the reverse, upside down. That was an upside down administration.
Still is.
Unemployment should be going down. On the labor, it was going up. I'm not the one who said it. I am not the one who wrote the Social and Economic Review. And if you believe we have influence over what they wrote there, then it means that you had influence over what they wrote there. And it could have been worse, if that's the case. So you want me to go on? You want to talk about performance of a government? So we move on. That's not the words of a politician. That is the word that is in the document of this house. What describes the performance of any government? So we move on. So you understand? Unemployment went to 24%. But people must not forget your campaign slogan. You are asked a question. What are the three top priorities of this government? Number one was jobs. Number two, jobs. Number three, jobs. So your three top priorities, you failed. You want to tell how to run a government? You want to tell, learn something.
15 years.
A number of policy indices measured would have contributed to an elevation in consumer prices in 2014. I had them crying about inflation and prices going up. Look at a number of things contributed to it. And here what they blaming? The financial crisis was in 2008.
When we were
It carried through. I agreed. It went on. But by 2011, the economy was growing. Now, in economics, when you measure the economy, okay, 3/4 of negative growth. In other words, 3 periods of 3 months of negative growth is considered a recession. So what would 3 years, which is 12 quarters, what would it be? A depression. This country went into a depression under the reigns of the St. Lucia Labour Party, led by the member for Beaufort South. So, now, Mr. Speaker, that must be taken in context, you know. The economy went into depression when they had increased license fees. They had 15% VAT. And fuel was at 16.85 a gallon. And the economy still went into a depression. 12 quarters. Now, people say negative growth. I don't know what that means. The economy was shrinking. You cannot be growing downwards. You can only be growing upward. I tell you, this was an upside down government. All they were doing is in the opposite direction. Everything was going in the opposite direction that it should be going. And today, Mr. Speaker,
Just absorb that.
hear us. The member for Beaufort South just read about liquidity in the banks and all of these things. And he said, look here, that doesn't mean anything. Well, let's hear what they say. So they talk about Heatherwoods. Monetary and credit conditions were mixed during 2014 as the money supply continued to expand, albeit at a slower rate. but credit conditions tightened. What is different? What is it you are trying to explain? You trying to explain, Mr. Speaker, through you. The member for Beaufort South was trying to explain what this government is doing when he could not even understand what he was doing at the time, Mr. Speaker. Because at least, if you compare apples with apples, look after 3 years and come and tell me, look here, I was able to do this. This is what happened under my watch. And as a result, I was a better leader than you because look, this is where you are. But I'm coming to that. We have not reached there yet. So, it goes on, Mr. Speaker, the words are in the overall deficit narrowed by an estimated 3.7% of GDP compared with a deficit of 5.8% in 2013. So deficits is something new. Is that something new? Then he goes on to say, to significant reductions in expenditure. The deficit was reduced, no different. Anytime you don't implement your programs, the margin, the deficit can reduce, but it is through lack of implementation. And both governments suffer from some of these same problems. Now the difference with you, with the members opposite and the members here, is we can identify when there's a problem and we take the steps to address the problem. So all they are telling you about Pemandu and what is happening with Caribbean Development Bank, why we have to spend that money, you see, people who understand how money operates knows that if money is sitting there, it is losing value. Because the present value of money is not going to be the same value 20 years from now. So when you fail to implement a program today, which is what they did with St. Jude and the airport, but I'm coming to that. We have time to deal with that. So I want you to understand what was happening. The problems of governments in this country have been one of implementation. But they, you see, they were worse. Because, you know why? They could only talk. They cannot work. At least we are getting some work done. And the evidence is there in the economy to show that the work is being done.
Black and white.
So, let's go on. Reflecting weakness of the economy and associated reductions. I'm reading page 16 of domestic situation. Reductions in domestic demand. The value of imports and goods declined by 4.1%. You want me to go on? I want St. Lucians to get hold of the social and economic review. Should be online. 2014, and read the performance of the St. Lucia Labour Party in office. Now you think the other year was better? 2015, St. Lucia's economy showed measurable signs of recovery in 2015 after a weak performance over the previous 3 years. They themselves admit that there was a weak performance of the economy for 3 consecutive years. That was the years of depression. Now, let's go to real governance now. Let us go to real governance now. What is the domestic situation today? Social and economic review. Now, I did not go to international developments, but you can go and read the first chapter that deals with all the international signs that influence economies before you say it's because the world was doing so well. That's why we were doing so well. But I want to go to domestic developments. Let me see, what page? Domestic developments. Page 8. Now, same set of people in the Ministry of Finance. let's say how they describe the situation in the third year of a United Workers' Party government led by Prime Minister, member for Mikud South. Hear this. Opening line. Preliminary estimates indicate that real GDP growth slowed by 1.5%. Real GDP growth slowed. It did not go in the opposite direction. It was growing,
At a slower rate.
but it was growing at a slower rate. Hold on, we are getting there. Under the Labour Party, it was declining at a slower pace. It's in the Social and Economic Review. You can go and read it. Under the UWP, it is growing at a slower pace. You can never understand that growth.
No, you were 1 point.
So, let's go on.
Simple economics.
Let's go on.
Simple.
So, real GDP growth slowed to 1.5% in 2018, following revised growth of 3.3% in 2017, notwithstanding, in other words, expansion in most other sectors, including tourism, agriculture, manufacturing. A downturn in construction. So there are two negative words there. Downturn in construction. Construction contracted by 21%. And we were still able to realize a 1.5% growth in the economy. So,
That's the opposite of a deceleration of negative growth.
yes, a deceleration of negative growth. Header words that describe this government performance. Supported by favorable economic conditions in key source markets, tourism sector remained a dominant source of economic activity. Growing. You heard that? Growing. Not declining. Growing. And the other one. Total visitor arrivals rose by. It didn't go down. It went up. You want me to give you other words? Mr. Speaker, here are the other words. 2.2% in 2018. Upward and rising.
Right.
By 2.2% in 2018. Recording the highest number of visitors to date. Upward and rising. And you are very good man at altitude. I know the honorable member for Labrie understands that. He's always at an altitude. He's not like his colleagues. He flies at a different level, Mr. Speaker. He flies at a different level. Okay.
But it levels out.
So here it goes on to say, the outturn was largely influenced by improved airlift and marketing efforts, buoyed by positive performance in most key source markets. I highlighted the negative words. The key source markets were always there, you know. You all didn't know how to. You all didn't know how to source the market.
Honorable Member Castries office.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, through you. Now, Mr. Speaker, we go on. We go on. Arrivals grew by 4.1%. And then it says the number of bed nights increased by 4.6%. And Heather, there was a rebound of arrivals by 26.7% in 2018. Agricultural sector, what happened to the agricultural sector? It recovered from contraction of 5.2% in 2017 with an estimated growth of 5.8%. So here's the difference. I always use my base figure. So if when you came into government, you found agriculture performing at 10%, you take it down to 3% in 3 years because it was declining. And the next year you grow it by 2%, you'll tell me it grew. But you're still 5% short of where you found it. So the decline that was there, the Minister of Agriculture has fully compensated for that with a 0.6% increase from what the decline was. Yes. Expansions are estimated. You heard that? Expansion is estimated in all sub-sectors. Okay?
Let's use the
Growth. You know, UK expanded by 5.8%.
That's you. Territorial property is you.
Then you have 7.4%. Banana percentage of 4,078 tons. Banana export earnings were 1.9% higher, 1.9 million higher. Production grew by 5.3% of non-banana crops. So, how many words you want me to use? Now, if I was a student, and I was reading the performance of one government beside another, and I was looking at what did you do during your time after free. Now, what's the difference? 3 years. 3 years. After 3 years, with 10 years of experience. Now, at least experience should count for something.
Yes, you think.
You would think that for the average job seeker, when you go there with experience, it means something. With these people, 10 years of inexperience.
Honorable member, the phrase, these people, please repeat.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. The honorable members on the other side, Mr. Speaker, they had 10 years of inexperience because they learned nothing. You see, it's not how long you're in government. You know, a man who is on a job for 1 year can have more experience than a man who's on the job for 10 years because of the things that he's exposed to during the time. We don't throw words on this side. We say what we have to say. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to bother people of St. Lucia with all the words that are there, but I want to tell the members opposite one side. If we are increasing the debt, why is the debt to GDP going down?
Percentage. Tomorrow or just now?
You see, Mr. Speaker,
Tomorrow or just now?
once the member,
Tomorrow, tonight.
the member, I will be very mindful about what he explains. Because if you ask the whipper president, during the whipper president for the West Indies Cricket Board, you ask him what happened during that time.
Honorable members.
If you ask
Honorable members, allow the member to make his presentation.
Mr. Speaker, if you ask the whipper president how he was able to win 14 cases against the member West Indies Cricket Board, today he wants to explain numbers. Don't you worry, whatever is to be known will be known in due course. Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, I move on.
What?
Mr. Speaker, the SLP government, when they were in government. Now I will touch on some sensitive matters here, Mr. Speaker, but it is necessary. You know why it is necessary, Mr. Speaker? Because the members opposite, when they cannot debate you on facts and figures, when your performance is so poor, you resort to scare tactics to try and make people believe that things are so bad in this country. I mean, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the performance of the Labour Party, if I was in their place, I'm not debating. If my performance in government is ever as bad as the performance of the Labour Party, I'm not debating in this house. I'm not debating. And I'm coming to the issues raised. The member for Dennery North, he spoke about our care for the people and we don't care about health care. If half the money that was used from the minister's account to do things were used to take care of the sick people in St. Lucia, a lot of people would be better off in St. Lucia today. Oh, it's cheap. It wasn't a lot of money. Mr. Speaker, now, let us measure the performance of this government because it is important for us to understand that. And everything we do for the people of St. Lucia, they tell you that's nothing. As if they themselves did something, Mr. Speaker. So let's look at taxing under these two administrations. When Labour came in, they increased license fees for vehicle, motor vehicle license fees. When we reintroduced the license fees, they criticized us. They said they had put it on the fuel. When they came into government, instead of taking it out, they increased it. You know what they did? They introduced VAT at 15%. And VAT that the former leader of the Labour Party called an oppressive tax was introduced at 15%. And so, Mr. Speaker, VAT was supposed to solve all our problems. So how VAT came in at 15% and his track record on the social and economic review is so poor. Now look at the difference. UWP came in, we reduced VAT from 15 to 12.5%. We reduced the increase of the license fees by 50%. Now I know they cannot understand that, Mr. Speaker, so through you I will explain. During the campaign, we said the increase that they put on, we will reduce it by 50%. They said, we said we were going to reduce the license fees by... I know they cannot understand that, Mr. Speaker, so we'll move on. So, Mr. Speaker, when you look at it, so when you add up, and during that time fuel was 16.85, the economy still didn't perform. Under a United Workers' Party government, with VAT reduced to 12.5%, with the license fees reduced, with exemption of property tax for 3 years, and with the waiver of the fees for the people at the hospital of almost $14 million. This economy has performed better than any year under the St. Lucia Labour Party. And with all of that, debt to GDP went down. Mr. Speaker, it is obvious that we are doing something right. Now, are we satisfied? Is that something to boast about? No. But we have to differentiate this side of the house from the side over there. So, Mr. Speaker,
Take it all in.
But it's the budget I'm debating.
Appropriations bill, the performance.
Mr. Speaker, under the SLP, what we saw was tax. So they promised the people jobs, jobs, and more jobs. You know what they gave the people? Tax, tax, and more tax. That is what happened on the Labour Party. And you can go and check the records. It was under their watch that water was increased by 100%. So, ask them, how much did they increase the storage fees at Lucia? The storage fees for the funeral, go and check for the fuel, go and check the record, and you will see it moved from 20 cents to 50 cents. The storage for fuel, the charge, it was raised under the Labour Party. The storage. So, Mr. Speaker, who has more compassion for the people of St. Lucia? Now, what is the approach of the opposition? Mr. Speaker, they attack and they try to sully everyone who stands up to them. Mr. Speaker,
Not tomorrow.
Mr. Speaker,
Tonight.
I will tell you, Mr. Speaker,
Tonight.
the SLP, through their operatives, go after everyone. And the member for Dennery North touched on a very sore point this morning, Mr. Speaker, imputing that a doctor, that a patient had died at the renal unit as a result of the hospital not operating at the renal unit.
Mr. Speaker, I want to rise on a point of order,
I
citing
can give you a point of
35.
clarification.
I did not attribute blame to any hospital. What I said, Mr. Speaker, was that subsequent to the young man's passing, the president of the Medical Association came out publicly and said that it could have been as a result of the support services not being available that he succumbed. I did not say, because I'm in no professional or technical position to make such pronouncements. So I will ask that the member withdraw that statement.
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to withdraw. Because what I said was that, what he said is that the person died because the hospital is not fully operational. In other words, if the hospital was there...
No, just you'll have to rephrase.
Okay, I will rephrase. Mr. Speaker, we say it in different ways, but that's okay, I will rephrase. Mr. Speaker, the insinuations by the member for Dennery North to indicate that somebody else, the president of the Medical and Dental Association, seemed to have been suggesting that the person died because there was not adequate facilities to mitigate against the situation. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is one doctor's point of view. The doctor who was in charge of the unit, who herself is a professional, came out and gave an explanation. At least the member for Dennery North, if he wanted to be fair to the discussion, he would have given the points of view of both doctors because he has no expertise in the area. But you see, Mr. Speaker, the biasness and the playing of cheap politics over grieving families in this country must stop by the members opposite. Don't try and use that to score cheap political points. Mr. Speaker, less than a month after that, Mr. Speaker, Somebody died in the office of the president. Was it negligence? Was it inadequate facilities in the doctor's office? What transpired?
Are you making a point of order?
Mr. Speaker, oh, you sensitive there.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, you cannot do that. That must not be allowed in the Parliament. This is disgraceful behavior. On a point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, the member has indicated he's standing on a point of order. Allow him to make a point.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the member is taking this Parliament to the lowest levels that it can be. We may wish, Mr. Speaker, bringing the Parliament into disrepute. You, Mr. Speaker, we may criticize each other, we may challenge each other, but for a member to stand in this honorable house and claim that a doctor out there killed a patient or caused the death of a patient in his office.
Honorable member for Castro South. Now using words that the member has not used at all.
Mr. Speaker.
No.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
We have to draw the line.
Honorable members.
Because, Mr. Speaker.
Have a seat. Honorable members, Prime Minister and former member of the Fort now.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm making a serious point, Mr. Speaker.
No, let me say to you, he did not use some words that you use. Some of the words that you've used are much stronger than what the members.
So you want me to? I can
No. Just hold on. The member asked the question, was it a possibility that this may have happened? But he never used the words that you used.
Mr. Speaker,
so you could say things.
Mr. Speaker.
You can say things. You can ask questions.
Really?
Without using some words.
Really, Mr. Speaker?
Yes. Because the words you use. No, listen to this.
Is that a new standard?
No, honorable member, allow me now. No, honorable member. No. Honorable members. Member for Bamono? That's okay now. Honorable members, there's a point here that we one day and soon will have to acknowledge. And that is why the need for the review of our standing orders is so critical. And maybe after this, in fact, I've taken some notes that I'll be writing again to the government, leader of government business and opposition business, for us to seriously look at the Constitution. Because to say, to say that a member in this house may not or should not refer to somebody on the outside may very well restricting your own rights provided to you by the Constitution and our standing orders. So it's something we have to look at. But let me come back to your point. The words that you ascribe to the member, he did not use those words. You've made it much stronger than I think he was making a point to. Now, I'm not saying to you that he should have said it. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying the words that you use in making your point of order or raising your point of order was much more powerful than what he actually said in the beginning. Okay, continue, honorable member. But you heard my ruling. Let's avoid it.
Same like a member of the North.
Mr. Speaker, I try to tread cautiously in this house.
And be even more cautious now.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, members opposite want to take the liberty to say what they want about people, and whenever you respond to them, they're crying foul. Mr. Speaker, I was only saying about this situation, and you know, Mr. Speaker, I came to you personally and I indicated, Mr. Speaker, that is a dangerous ground, because at the end of the day, But it was public knowledge. I said it on the media that the same way the criticism, because you see, Mr. Speaker, we must not miss the point. The point is attributing blame to this government for the OKEU hospital not being open. That is what the member for Dennery North wants to do, to blame the government indirectly for the death of somebody. That is the intention. And so, the same people, that's why they tell you God is not sleeping. Because when last did we hear an incident like that happening in St. Lucia? That's what we call karma. You cannot attack another professional in the same field. I'm not a doctor.
Only in politics.
I deal with the politics. And if we are going to make statements about people, let us be fair in the statement. You're not a professional, you're not a doctor. If you report what both doctors said. That's correct. Then be fair. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to expound on that further. Because, Mr. Speaker, the former president of the Medical and Dental Association has been on a rampage of attack on this government. And go on social media, Mr. Speaker. Go on social media and see how much, Mr. Speaker, see how much the new president of the Medical and Dental Association is being attacked by the operatives of the St. Lucia Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. It's evident. Go on Slaps, go on all of the websites and see what is there, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, then enough, Mr. Prime Minister, allow the member for Castri's office. Honorable member, Castri's office, continue, sir. Castri's office, continue, sir.
Mr. Speaker, you know why this is a very sensitive issue for me? It is.
And let me inform you at this present time, you have 10 minutes left in which to complete your presentation.
1 hour. Yes.
How much does he want? Mr. Speaker, I rise to suspend Standing Order 3210 in order to give the member from Castries Southeast another hour.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order 4210 be invoked and that the member for Castries Southeast and Minister for Economic Development be granted an additional 1 hour in which to complete his presentation. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to honorable members. Mr. Speaker, I was saying this issue of medical stuff is very sensitive to me, especially at this point in time. Mr. Speaker, I deal with the issues pertaining to the politics every day. We come to this house, we debate, we deal with the issues. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to medical care, all of us should be concerned. And I know all of us are concerned. The difference is that those who are making the most noise about being concerned had the reins of power for how many years and did nothing to resolve the situation for the people of St. Lucia. and the member touched 2012, but I will touch on the others, the dates that he did not touch. So when members want to talk about what is needed for St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, national health infrastructure. I want to do 2013 first. Mr. Speaker, it says, progress on the commissioning. Now that's the budget speech by the member for Beaufort South in 2014. And you see, and you would understand, Mr. Speaker, why some people's words mean nothing. Nothing. Listen to this. Page 75 of the budget address, number 9.2.1. Progress on the commissioning of the new national hospital continues at a vigorous pace with support from the NAO and other stakeholders. With handover of the site expected before year end. Now that was 2013. Handover expected before year end. The activities related to government of St. Lucia counterpart construction anticipated to commence in May of 2014 with the largest deliverable, construction of the cafeteria. It will be completed in early 2014. As we speak, it's not completed. So, the work plan envisaged that the official handover and operationalizing of the new hospital will reasonably take place in the latter part of 2014. That was in 2014. The St. Lucia Labour Party administration said that the OKEU hospital would be opening in the latter part of 2014. Mr. Speaker, how can the member for Dennery North come to this honorable house and try to make the house believe that because we moved the dialysis to the OKEU, that is the reason why somebody died there? If they had done what they had promised for the people of St. Lucia, the healthcare would not have been in the situation that it is today. Now that's what they said in 2013. Let us say what they said in 2014. When I tell you these people, Mr. Speaker, the members opposite works in reverse. They never move forward. You remember when he presented oh, you wasn't there, there was another speaker. When he spoke about the 4 forward and the only a Ferguson. Same number of gears forward, same number of gears reverse. That's how they operate, Mr. Speaker. So let's say page 48, 3.1.3, National Health Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, not you, that was, I'm quoting the other Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, modern health infrastructure is vital to the delivery of quality health care. By 2015, St. Lucia will open 2 brand new hospitals. So here, in 2014, the member for Beaufort South said by the latter part of 2014, they will open OKEU. In 2014, he comes back and he says, by 2015, St. Lucia will open 2 brand new hospitals, which stands as a monumental investment in our future as a country. Where are the hospitals they open, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I want you to ask them for me, which 2 hospitals they open. Because, Mr. Speaker, it cannot be that we continue to come to this honorable house and we are supposed to regard what we are hearing on the other side, Mr. Speaker. And these are budget speech after budget speech for 5 years, promising dates. The last date that was promised was September of 2016. And the member in a television interview said that for $60 million, they would have had a state-of-the-art hospital in St. Jude. And Mr. Speaker, when a man cannot even stand by his own words, what can you regard him for? Your word is your bond. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. So, Mr. Speaker, so when I hear all the noise coming from the other side, you know what a wise man said? What you do speak so loud, I cannot hear what you are saying. So what they have done speaks so loud that no matter what they say, I'm not hearing. Because action speaks louder than words. And all they have is words, no action.
Zero.
So, Mr. Speaker,
Action.
Mr. Speaker, you know why the healthcare is concerning to me? I will tell you. When it hits home, it is different. Very different. And we have very good doctors in St. Lucia. And I applaud the doctors that we have there. But you know what? When doctors become politicians, and they have lost sight of the noble profession of being a doctor, and that they would stoop to the lowest common denominator of the gutter politics of the Labour Party and bring the profession into disrepute. That is what happens, Mr. Speaker. No, you should talk about Keith. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what I'm saying. So you appreciate firsthand what I'm saying here, Mr. Speaker.
He declared himself.
When my brother fell sick
He declared himself.
and he was taken to the hospital,
He declared
he was
himself.
taken to a hospital. You know what his wife and son was told? He wasn't taking care of himself. He used to drink rum. So he's going to die. There's nothing we can do for him. And nothing was done for him.
Your hospital.
Thanks to the other doctors
Your hospital.
who still hold the profession as a noble profession. They did whatever they could. They induced a coma. And we took him to Matney. Mr. Speaker, while we paid our own way to get things done, while he was there, while the helicopter, the air ambulance came to pick him up, there were operatives of the Labour Party who stood on the hill, took his picture, took his condition, and had it posted on social media. That is the level. That is the level of the politics of the St. Lucia Labour Party. And if they cannot get you one way, Mr. Speaker, they get you another way.
Serious? Serious?
Very serious. Mr. Speaker, there are lots of things that I don't say. You know, you enjoy. My wife is seated in the gallery, Mr. Speaker. With the exception of the member for Labrie, every one of them on this side has taken a swipe at her integrity. Every one of them. Up to this morning, Mr. Speaker, I sat and I heard them talk about CHTTI getting $10 million. You think I could not stand on a point of order and ask them to show where CHTTI ever got $10 million? They know that's a lie, Mr. Speaker, but they continue to perpetuate it. Mr. Speaker, I am saying this so that St. Lucians understand. I am saying that, Mr. Speaker, so that St. Lucians understand to what the Labour Party does not have a problem with my wife, Mr. Speaker. They have a problem with me. But because they've not been able to get me, they go after everybody who has been affiliated or associated to me in one way or the other. And I tell you, Mr. Speaker, the member for Viewfort South think he's a bully. And he thinks, yes, you think I was Chasney's poodle, I can't think you are a bully. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member,
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
stay on point.
I'm staying on course. Mr. Speaker, the attacks keep coming. They keep coming. But you see, they've not been able to succeed, Mr. Speaker. So I want to show you, Mr. Speaker, they went out and they commissioned a forensic audit. Mr. Speaker, the biggest fraud investigator, Cabinet confirmed the appointment of Mr. Robert Lindquist for the purpose of conducting a forensic audit investigation on behalf of the government of St. Lucia. The Attorney General, after consultation with the Prime Minister, will act on behalf of the government of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker,
Who was the PM then?
I am still asking for that report that the government of St. Lucia paid in excess of $3 million for, to be made a document of this House. Mr. Speaker, every one of the receipts that Treasury paid, with one back page of the signature of the contract, was the only thing on the system of government. That's fair. Mr. Speaker, when we come to this honorable House, and the member for Viewfort South as Prime Minister, now we're talking about democracy, and we're talking about the budget, Mr. Speaker. The member for Viewfort South said publicly that he will do whatever it takes to see to it that I do not make it back into this honorable House. So, Mr. Speaker, why should I not be offended by what is happening? How can a Prime Minister use the state resources to try to unseat a member of government? Now, here's why I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker. So you get the connection. We are doing developments in Viewfort. And what did they say about the developments we are doing in Viewfort? They said we are trying to do these things in Viewfort for them to lose the seats in Viewfort. It was said during this debate in this honorable House. So we are developing the South, and it's for them to lose their seats. But the then Prime Minister could say that I will do whatever it takes. And he did it, you know, Mr. Speaker. He did it. He put nominations on a Saturday. He put nominations on a Saturday, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want you to understand. I want you to understand what is happening in this honorable House when the St. Lucia Labour Party is in office. All they attempt to do, Mr. Speaker, if they cannot get you, so of late, Mr. Speaker, I heard they talking about letters that are circulating. And the member for Castries East took the liberty to speak about it. I will tell them, I am Minister of Economic Development. I am the minister with responsibility to deal with all of the funding agencies for government projects. CDB, World Bank, everything. So, Mr. Speaker, do we write letters? Yes, we write letters. Can I account for letters that are in the public domain? No, I cannot account for it. I can only account for letters that are in my ministry. But you see, Mr. Speaker, some people forget the letters that they themselves write. So sometimes you have to remind this honorable house what happens. And when they write their letters, headline. Now that's an official document that has been made a document of this house. Robert Ainsworth. So it says in the paragraph before the last, Mr. Speaker, it says, this letter and the terms and its terms is to be kept confidential as between the parties and your intended joint venture partners only, and will become public only upon mutual agreement of the parties. So yes. So, Mr. Speaker, they said that was a letter of comfort. Because I want you to understand what the Labour Party is doing to stifle the progress and development of this country. And you heard the member talk about the Taiwanese funded projects, Mr. Speaker. Because what they are doing is trying to instill fear that if the Labour Party comes into office, they are not going to honor some of the payments. And they have said it before. So what they are trying to do is to scare away people from doing any business. They will seek to destroy this country at any cost, Mr. Speaker. True. So listen to this. On page 3 of the letter, what they said was a comfort letter. I would like to confirm that at a meeting of cabinet on the 8th of February 2016, it was agreed by the cabinet that upon receiving written confirmation from the Lifestyle Group PLC of the level of investment being made by it and each of the subsidiaries incorporated, and then it goes on to say all of the list of incentives that they are entitled to. And the list is endless. Mr. Speaker, I want to show you the part. Now, we've heard so much about withholding tax in this, that we gave away money to a hotel developer on withholding tax. Well, here's what their letter says, based on cabinet. Withholding tax. The development company, its stakeholders, directors, managers, real estate owners, any and all joint venture partners shall have the right to repatriate dividends, interest, principal payments on any loans made to them and any payments made to them for services free of withholding tax, income tax, corporate tax, and any other taxes in effect to be enacted. So even what they have not enacted yet, what has not come to Parliament to become law, the cabinet already gave them waiver of it. Companies that employ thousands of St. Lucians have been contributing the most meaningfully to the growth of this economy. You attack this government for giving them the same withholding tax that you're offering to a fly-by-night investor. And I'm supposed to take the members opposite serious. I'm supposed to take them serious.
All the man did is buy lunch for them and they're ready to give you one.
The same company they're talking about, Mr. Speaker. You see, when you have people who are not genuine, pretending to be genuine. Cabinet conclusion, number 188 of 2013. What does it say? Pursuant to subsection 130 of the Income Tax Act, Cap 1502, 100% waiver of withholding tax for a period of 10 years from January 1st, 2013. Mr. Speaker, all the UWP government did when we came into office was to bridge a time period that what a company was entitled to. How come the members opposite who sat in government made the same decisions and want to come and mislead the people of St. Lucia into believing that the government has done something so egregious that they've given $24 million of taxpayers' money? If I go to the other company, not just the withholding tax they gave them, the tax that had been collected on behalf of the government, there was a waiver, and even the people's NIC was waived. You know, I've told you I'm not coming here because politicians make bad decisions does not give us the liberty to attack the people who invest and contribute more meaningfully than the opposition to the economy of this country. And so, Mr. Speaker, we look at the approach being taken. Once you don't agree with SLP, they attack you. It doesn't matter what your profession is. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a teacher, if you're a farmer or a fisherman. It doesn't matter if you're the sanitation workers. You remember how many of them they fired? 13 of them. Don't go there. I have the cabinet conclusion. Is your habit of misleading the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, through you. They cannot help themselves. They cannot speak the truth. And then they accuse other people of being foreigners to the truth. Now, here's the biggest problem, Mr. Speaker. Families have been under attack since the Labour Party landed in opposition. So their new slogan is friends, family, and undeserving foreigners. Now, for a country that depends predominantly on tourism, how can a responsible opposition brand people coming to this country as undeserving foreigners? No responsible opposition will do that, Mr. Speaker. You see, they don't care if St. Lucia sink or if it floats. As long as they are there, it is sinking. So, Mr. Speaker, you started that long before WePay came in the equation, so it couldn't be because of WePay. Mr. Speaker, I go on to say, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the attack, and I want you see, Mr. Speaker, if people don't understand what is happening, there is...
Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the families had been under attack from the campaign. And I want to remind St. Lucia that when the Labour Party was in government, Mr. Speaker, they said this is not an election against the United Workers' Party. This was an election against a family. So the family had been under attack from then. Because what they said, this is not an election against UWP and SLP. This is an election against the Shasnes. That is what was said. You can try to defend it, Honorable Member, through you, Mr. Speaker, but there are some things that cannot be defended, and that is one of them. But you know why the people of St. Lucia have come under attack by the St. Lucia Labour Party? Because more than half of St. Lucia said, we are Shasnes. Because that is why they voted the United Workers' Party and rejected the St. Lucia Labour Party. That is what it is. So you know what? Mr. Speaker, here's what they cannot deal with, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, every family in this country knows that they are better off under the leadership of the honorable member for Mikud South. Mr. Speaker, I go on to say that everything that the Labour Party attacks, they destroy. And they are seeking to destroy the core of this country, which is the family. And so what they are attempting
Honorable
to
members.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the house, we are proud to identify with this team. And I will tell you, this is the A team on this side. This is the LM team on this side. This is the A team. And that is why we are able to deliver for the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a government who was spending $1,000 on $1 million a year on the repairs of schools, $1 million in infrastructure for road repairs. In 1 year, we spend more money than you would have spent in 10 years in government in school pond repair. In 1 year, in the Ministry of Infrastructure, $14 million was spent in road maintenance and upgrade. And with all of that money we are spending, the debt to GDP is going down. That is sound fiscal management. Another book there I would show you. I can loan it to the member. Personal finances for dummies. I can loan it to any one of you on this side. It may sound like that, but there are vital lessons in there. You see, Mr. Speaker, a country does not rise to a level by accident. There must be calculated and proper planning in order to grow the economy. And look at what we've been able to do in just 3 years in government, Mr. Speaker. When a member came to the house, I said, honorable member, even if you don't agree with
Honorable
us.
member, then resolve.
Mr. Speaker, I said to the honorable member for Viewfort South, even though you don't agree with us, with who we chose to build the airport, choose who you want. I'm on the record as saying this. Choose whoever you want, but don't stop the project. Go and get your own contractor, do what you have to do, but you stop collecting. Mr. Speaker, I came in from Boston some time ago. The flight was 100% full. You know how many St. Lucians are on the flight? 6 St. Lucians. All of these were people paying money to build the airport. And you know, in the wisdom, and remember I gave you a definition about the stripes and the foods. In the wisdom of the members opposite, you know what they did? They said there's not a block on the ground, so we stop in the $35 to increase tourist arrivals. And like I told you, Mr. Speaker, because they work upside down, you know what happened? The tourist numbers went down. Even if the money went down, the tourist numbers went down. So where are we going, Mr. Speaker? Is there hope?
That's where we're going.
Is there hope on the other side, Mr. Speaker? St. Lucia is in a hopeless state under the reins of the St. Lucia Labour Party, and the records will show that this is what it is.
The record has shown.
Mr. Speaker, there's so much information to be dealt with. You know, I had the member for Dennery North talk about the issues that confront us with crime. And I remember the member for Castries Central standing up right here and saying that prayers was stopped in cabinet. When the leaders of the country do not pray, where are they going to lead this country? And she said the member for Viewfort South stopped prayers in cabinet. She said it right here.
Gospel.
You have to say it's the truth. Mr. Speaker, when we have issues that confront us, we have to be able to deal with it. Mr. Speaker, I heard them talk about the employees and what we do to employees. It was this Labour Party administration that stopped the pension program of government workers. And when he tell you people are going off and they don't know what is going on, as the public servant who has to retire at 55, but gets their pension when they get to 65, ask them how they bridge that gap. Ask them what is happening. Mr. Speaker, the workers in this country have fared so badly under the Labour Party. They gave the same public servants, they gave them 0, 0, 0. And in the last term in government, Mr. Speaker, and the records are there, they did not put the list of workers together on the same book as we put it, because they were going to take off the 5% of the salary of public servants. And when the unions, not the unions, when some of the leaders of the unions want to play politics with the livelihood of the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, this is a responsible government. You know what happened to them? They said they were not taking the increase. Now they're in opposition. They have taken the government to court to pay them their salary increase. How can you operate like that in an environment, and you want people to respect you, Mr. Speaker? You want people to agree with you? Now, Mr. Speaker, I need to go to my constituency. Yes, the one you tried to take away and you couldn't. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you see, as I go to my constituency, Mr. Speaker, you can see, Mr. Speaker, this is the housing development in Forest Hill. The roads are... Now, I want to say something to all the people of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, as I pause there on this, it is important for me to say this to the people of St. Lucia. They say we are government for friends, foreigners, and undeserving friends, family, and foreigners. Well, Mr. Speaker, I will make a bold pronouncement in this House that before the end of this term, more St. Lucians will own land in St. Lucia through the efforts of government than any previous time by any other government. Mr. Speaker, and I start with Dennery North. And I've told the member for Dennery North that in Olio, we are already working with the DCA to survey the lands and to give we're not selling the land to the people in Olio because it's too complicated to try and sell the land. As a government, we have taken a decision that we are going to give the land to the occupiers in Olio.
member. Henry, no, Henry, no, what do you say? What do you have to say?
We are working to finalize things in cantonment, in Auger, in Pom, and all of the areas in the south where the proud projects are being implemented so that we can give the people title at minimal cost. Lacroix also. We have some work to do in Lacroix. In Boisjoli, in Dennery, the housing development is coming. In Goodlands, Roseau, and Canneries, their housing developments coming, and we are making land available. In Talvan, in Babono, in Shock Estate, in Balambush, and in Choiseul proper.
Honorable
and in Yai.
members.
Mr. Speaker, in Prale, these people have been waiting for their lands in Prale, and the member for Mikud North knows that, and through her, we are going to deliver in making sure that the people of Prale get title to their lands. We are going to give more land to the people of St. Lucia than Teo Hakim can dream of owning in St. Lucia. That is the difference. We're not giving 4,000 acres to Robert Ainsworth. No, we are giving the land to the people of St. Lucia. Because you know what? We need to empower the people, Mr. Speaker. And that's why I said empowering the average. You see, this government thrives on poverty. They want to keep the people in poverty because you say gouvernement malewe. So si se mounan l'argent, se mounan pa vote by you. But that the difference with us is we want to empower the people. And you look at what the honorable member for ancillary canneries is doing in his constituency. The people of this constituency have never been more empowered and more independent at any other period of time than during the 3 years of the honorable member for ancillary canneries. You look at Soufrière. I mean, sometimes I get a little jealous of Soufrière and the number of projects that are being developed. And now they call them the Western Boys. Well, the western side of parliamentary representatives are delivering beyond expectation in that belt of the island. You see, Mr. Speaker, it's about the people. It's not about us who make all the noise in this house. If we cannot deliver for the people, we are wasting our time in government. And so, Mr. Speaker, I represent the minibus drivers. And they call me bus driver. You see, Mr. Speaker, they can call me all names. They call me Coolie Boy. He said, the member for Beaufort South said, Upan sentiment. Emma said, pli mwen pwè diye bay ti boy la. Pa korije. Every possible phrase. Chasnez poodle. They call me all names. But I have thick skin, Mr. Speaker. I have thick skin. He cannot get under my skin. And that's why they attack the people around me. So my wife pays a heavy price for me being in politics. When you are investigated by Robert Lindquist, one of the #1 fraud investigators in the world, and they cannot find anything on you. And I'm not asking you. If you think, I don't know, bring the report here.
Bring it up.
Bring the report. You paid $3 million, not from your pocket.
It belongs to St. Lucia.
The same people who say we are wasting money could pay $3 million and hide the report. Because they got it. I know when they got it at Slasper. And I know when they had the meeting. And they could not believe that there was nothing on me.
So there's a report.
Oh,
So there's a report.
you know there's a report.
So there's a report.
The nicest CV I ever saw on me is on this. And you know the only accusation on me? What they call political interference or political pressure. When I went on the media and I said that the project is scheduled to start. That is what I am cited for. There are people it says much more about than it says about me. That's why they're not releasing it. Because the people they want is me they want. But the report found other people. So they're not releasing the report. Huh? What? But you have the report. You see, Mr. Speaker, the member for Viewfort South could have come on television and read what was in the impacts report that messed up the whole case. As a lawyer, he knew that that should not have been done. He knows that. He knows that. You see, Mr. Speaker, but the report about me, they came town and village council, make it document of the house, everything. Where's the linguist report? Bring it to the Honorable House. Let's debate it. Let's see how corrupt Guy Joseph is. You see, Mr. Speaker, if you can bring me down to the gutter, then if you need to raise me up, raise me up. Let the report speak for itself. Because, Mr. Speaker, I have told the Attorney General and the Prime Minister that if they're not going to take steps to address that matter, I will take my steps personally. And if Robert Lindquist is all what he says he is, and I expect it to be posted on social media, we've written to him for the report. Every attempt has been made to secure the report from him. He drew $3 million from the government of St. Lucia, but the report cannot be found.
How much? 3 million?
$3 million. I'm the most expensive man in St. Lucia today. No commission of inquiry has cost that amount of money in this country. Look, commission of inquiry, Ramsahoy report. That was $1 million. So, Mr. Speaker, I want you to understand what is happening in this country. Mr. Speaker, it is a challenge to be honest in this country. I can tell you, I suffer it every day. It is a challenge to be honest. Because when you are honest, people think that you are lying. And those who lie get away with the lies every day. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, one of these days, I will lay my hand on the formal report. And everybody in St. Lucia will see. The members of Sir John to court for $30-something thousand for a drain in the Mang that is still in the Mang. In Manhattan. The drain is still in Manhattan. But they took Sir John to court for $30,000. Mr. Speaker, the member for Viewfort South. Now let me give you a scenario. If after my good representation in Castries Southeast, all the contractors that I gave work for 5 years were to say, we are buying you a brand new Lexus, what would you say to me? And because I declared to Integrity Commission, that makes it right. Did I take money from my pocket and do things for the people of Castries Southeast? No. The member for Viewfort South, Mr. Speaker, he did things for the people in Viewfort. They bought him a Prado, but it's okay. He can get it. But when other people get things, they are corrupt. Yeah. They are crooked. They are this, they are that. You see, Mr. Speaker, there must not be double standards in the politics of St. Lucia. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And so, Mr. Speaker, I move on with my constituency. So we have the Forestier Housing Development. Other paper there. Other paper there. I close it, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, now I invite members in this honorable house. You need to visit a place they call Chocolate City in my constituency. Chocolate City. Now, I know some of you may be interested in Chocolate City So I will not give you all of the information, but that is a project. These people had to walk to their homes in mud for all of these years. My first term in government, I built a bridge because these people had to go down in the river. Now I have completed with Chocolate City. Then we moved to Capitol Hill, Mr. Speaker. And members talk about stopping projects. Mr. Minister Member for Babono, I want to thank you for the work that WASCO is doing. WASCO has never been more efficient and effective in any period of time in St. Lucia, as we are seeing now. And I applaud the management and the team at WASCO. We had all these spaghetti lines at Capitol Hill. And Mr. Speaker, I engaged WASCO through the minister, and we were able to get WASCO to come and run a main line there. Now that it is completed through CDP, we are reinstating the road. And you know what was good about that construction? We put some 4-inch pipes across the road, so if there are new houses built, you don't have to go and cut the road. You can just push the 1-inch pipe through the 4-inch, so you can pass 4 pipes in there to accommodate the new houses that would be built without having to cut the road. Yes, we put sleeves. Badney Court. We built that court, Mr. Speaker, during the first term in government. And it was left, it had minor refurbishment that was required. 5 years of labor, they did nothing for the people. We are now fully refurbishing the court at Badney. And downstairs is now a preschool with over 40 children in the community being housed in the preschool down there. So we are fully upgrading this place so that it can meet the needs of the community. We move on. Tiroche. I want to thank the Minister of Infrastructure because after the rains of last year or year before, we had a major slide in the Tiroche area and most of the road was gone. Part of the road was closed for an extended period of time. We have now built a retaining wall and reinstated the road for the people in the area. I know my colleague from Babono enjoys passing on that road also. Cul-de-sac. Mr. Speaker, we don't discriminate against areas in the constituency. Whether you voted for me or you didn't vote for me, doesn't matter. Everywhere there is work needed, we do it. And that is a concrete road that we have done in the cul-de-sac community to alleviate the problems that the people have. And I want to assure the principal of the Odsa School had spoken to me about that road, and I gave them the guarantee that the road would be done. And I thank my ministry for seeing to it that it is being done. Mr. Speaker, we are working on a trail. I've had discussions with the Minister of Agriculture in Forestier. That was the worst part of the road, so we've done it in concrete because it leads to the nature trail at the forest. And we are working along with the Ministry of Agriculture to get the community to take over the trail because that gives you the best hike in closest proximity to Castries or to the cruise ship so that we can generate some economic activity for the community. We move on quickly, Mr. Speaker. The Forestier Road is in a deplorable condition, but I know as of this week, through the Ministry of Infrastructure, a contract is being prepared and would be awarded for the full rehabilitation of the Forestier Road. So, Mr. Speaker, I know the residents had to endure bad road for an extended period of time. But I told the member for Castries North, I am not patching the road. I want a full reinstatement. And I know when you patch the road, it becomes an extended period of time before you can get work done. So now I know we are going to have what was described, or what Denry North got, which was a nice carpet road. We are going to get a carpet in Forestier also. Mr. Speaker, we move on. The Odsa Road Rehabilitation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's a community that's across the river in Odsa. And that bridge had been washed away by one of the hurricanes. We have rebuilt the bridge. And even during the Christmas Eve drop, the road was severely damaged. Nothing was done from 2013 in that area. For our CDP, we've been able to put a concrete road for the people in that area. Mr. Speaker, talking about projects that were stopped. We moved to the Sun Valley Park. That's the park in Bexon. That's the park that I pleaded and I begged and I wrote letters and I did everything. We just needed a few $1,000s from CDP to finish that project. For 5 years, I asked. I was left in the corridor of the ministry, waiting as the parliamentary representative, and the persons in charge were passing me up and down. The late Mr. James and myself. And Mr. James tell me, you can put up with that. I'm walking away from this. I cannot be treated. That is how we were treated by members opposite when they were in government. We begged to finish the park for the residents of Bexon. It was never done. Mr. Speaker, as soon as we came into government, we have delivered a state-of-the-art Sun Valley Park in the Bexon community. And as the member for Beaufort South passes along the highway, because I'm his parliamentary representative. No, you got very good representation when I was the minister. I patch all the holes and I put lights on the road going to your home. I recommended. I'm his MP. That's why when he misbehaves, I can call him to order.
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, through you, Mr. Speaker, I move on quickly.
I never do that.
Mr. Speaker, so the Sun Valley Park is completed. Bexon. Mr. Speaker, through the Ministry of Infrastructure, I patched the road when you were there. When I was Minister
Honorable
of
members.
Infrastructure.
Honorable member, Castle South, East.
Mr. Speaker, you know, the Labour Party administration was spending sometimes 1.5 million on the entire island for this silting. I have to applaud the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Infrastructure. In Castries Southeast alone, we spent about $1.4 million on this silting. Ching ching. Money in the people's pocket. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, over 40 contractors were engaged in the silting works in the constituency of Castries Southeast. And Mr. Speaker, when everybody expected Bexon and Odsa to flood with the heavy rains we had, there was no flooding. We thank God for this and the work that was done by the ministry. Yes. And so, Mr. Speaker, we move on. The Forestier playing field. And that's where the Good Friday tape ball competition takes place. So, Mr. Speaker, we are now putting a sun surface on the field and we are going to have grass. So, I thank the Ministry of Infrastructure for allowing us the permit to collect the sun from the Roseau area. Honorable member for this area, Roseau. We got the sun and we've been able to relay the entire surface. The lights are being worked on, so we are going to have a state-of-the-art facility in the community of Forestier. Mr. Speaker, we move on. We move to Sarot. Mr. Speaker, Sarot Community Center and Multipurpose Court. Mr. Speaker, again, another project started in 2010-2011. For 5 years, laid waste. The Labour Party would not raise a finger to do anything to help Castries Southeast because they wanted me to lose. And so, Mr. Speaker, we came in and we've been able to complete the court and put a community center below it so that the young people of the Sarot community have a recreational area to use their energies. Mr. Speaker, we move on. Bexon, we're doing concrete roads in these areas. We are improving this. Mr. Speaker, I move on to the next project. There are so many concrete roads we have to do in the Bexon area. Mr. Speaker, you see, sometimes I'm in the house and sometimes I'm on the house. So in this case, I was on the house because we believe in working to improve the lives of the people of the community. And through SSDF, through the Minister for Equity, and when they say, oh, we have no money, and because there's not a vote with a particular name, through the help of SSDF and CDP, we built over 6 houses in the constituency for underprivileged people within the constituency of Castries Southeast, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, Odsa boulder packing is the next one. On the eve of an impending storm, the wall collapsed, and through the Ministry of Infrastructure and its engineers, we were able to put a boulder packing. Fortunately, the rains did not come, so the road did not get damaged. But where you see the vehicle is, that's where the road is, and we had to put in that retaining wall in order to go. And so, Mr. Speaker, I move to my last project that I will highlight, because I don't want them to say we have so many projects like Soufre in Castries Southeast. Mr. Speaker, that is, yes, that is a project that was also started and about 50% complete. That is in the Mon area. You know, Mon is a different community. You have a lot of the elderly people, a lot of the retired people in that area. And we were building a recreational area. For 5 years, the project stayed there, and not a block was laid on this project. Mr. Speaker, you saw the previous picture, and you are seeing. That is the construction phase, the first picture, and that is what the park looks like now. It is completed, Mr. Speaker. That was during the construction phase. So, Mr. Speaker, I want you to put the finished picture so that they can see. Because, Mr. Speaker, that's the next project, the completed picture of the park, the Mon Park. Mr. Speaker, what has happened in the constituency of Castries Southeast is that we need, that is what the park looks like today, Mr. Speaker. And the people in the area have it as a recreational area. And on each of the pillars of this park will be the names of prominent people who have contributed meaningfully to the development of St. Lucia and in different ways from the Mon area. So you can go and read about the various families who have made meaningful contributions, who reside in this area. And it is also going to be a Wi-Fi hotspot. There's a church next door, and they have committed to helping us with the maintenance of the park because it is a good recreational area for them. Mr. Speaker, I will just close. There's a project coming in Choiseul, Saltibus. We have the community center. We have community centers coming in PM's constituency. We have other projects. We have 2 community centers coming in Castries Southeast. We have the drainage project for the Dennery playing field under DVRP. Mr. Speaker, the ministries are working. The wellness center, and they couldn't differentiate between mental wellness. The drawings are completed. The new block for the Dennery school, Mikud school, has been completed. We have completed the state-of-the-art facility at Choiseul, and I know the member for Choiseul promised to deliver the school to the people of Choiseul, and this has happened. And so, Mr. Speaker, by the first week of May, the Dennery Polyclinic will recommence, and this time we have the drawings done properly. The Dennery Polyclinic will be completed. You see, Mr. Speaker, this is about people development. And I want to assure the people of Castries Southeast that we are going to deliver on what we promised. Mr. Speaker, we are working on a small call center. The training will begin along with the NAPS program. We already have a commitment to get 30 people to work in the call center, and that is going to be opened within the constituency of Castries Southeast, so that when the people are employed, they don't have a long distance to travel to get to and from work. Mr. Speaker, we are focused on educational development. There's a new kitchen that we are putting with assistance from other donors at the Odsa Primary School. Brand new kitchen, refrigerator, stove, and everything. For make it happen, we got help to improve the library at the Odsa Primary School. Mr. Speaker, for the Ministry of Education, a lot of work is being done on the repair of schools, from changing doors and ceilings. I mean, when I went into the Odsa school, and the bath waste was that thick, Mr. Speaker, and the children had been exposed to that for many years. Thanks to the work being done through the Ministry of Education, we were able to improve. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget for the people of St. Lucia. And I can understand why the members opposite cannot appreciate that, because they don't want the people to come out of poverty. But under the reins of this government, the people of St. Lucia are faring a lot better. And while we have not accomplished what we want, but we are on the right road to full recovery and to deliver it. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I beg that we can adjourn this House until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Honorable members, the question is that the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. I now put a question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Well, there you have it. The session on the debate on the appropriation bill for the financial year 2019-2020 has ended for this evening, and to be adjourned for tomorrow at 9 a.m. The presenters for this evening was the MP for Vivat South, the Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony, and of course the MP for Castries South is the Honorable Guy Joseph. So this is where we come to the end of the evening session, and as I indicated a moment ago, that the House will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. for the continuation on the debate of on the appropriation bill for 2019-2020. And so we thank you for viewing, and we invite you to join the National Television Network tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for the continuation on the debate on the appropriation. Well, I'm Prime Minister Hutchinson. Thank you so much for viewing.